Good morning, and it's Friday, October the 15th, 2021. Let it be known. Another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association and the Black Press of America's morning live show. Dr. Stephanie Myers, co-chair of the Black Women for Positive Change, is a national policy focused network of predominantly African-American women and good brothers from states including California, Colorado, District of Columbia, Florida, Georgia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, New York, Texas, and Virginia. That's a mouthful, but that shows you they are everywhere. This morning, we speak live with Dr. Stephanie Myers about how we can change the culture of violence. First, of course, let's start with the headlines. 50 years later, mass incarceration has really shown how it has wreaked havoc upon America, particularly African Americans. The incarceration rate in the U.S. has grown at an exponential rate. Today, the U.S. has the largest prison population in the world. Incarceration is especially common in poor communities of color, where nearly 70% of Black men who did not finish high school or approaching midlife will be in prison at some point in their lives. A review including new data was published yesterday in Science, the website, by experts at Washington University in St. Louis and Duke University. It exposes the harm mass incarceration has on families and advocates for family-friendly criminal justice interventions. For this review, the authors, who are professors of sociology at Duke University and Washington University, they shifted the focus to the families of incarcerated men who make up the majority of imprisoned people in the U.S. Family member incarceration has become exceedingly common among American families, the authors found. Nearly half of all young adults ages 18 to 49 have an immediate family member defined as a parent, child, sibling, current romantic partner, or anyone who the respondent ever had a child with who has been imprisoned. Family member incarceration is even more pervasive for African American families, impacting far more than 60% of adults under the age of 50. The indirect consequences of mass incarceration experienced by family members are likely more sizable than those for the men who experience incarceration. According to the study, they said family members of the incarcerated have rarely, if ever, been involved in the crimes that their incarcerated family members have committed, and as a result, are the collateral damage of the criminal justice system in a very real and tangible way. Because mass incarceration disproportionately impacts African American families, it also exacerbates existing inequalities, the authors of the review found. You can read a whole lot more about that at blackpressusa.com and many of our local newspapers around the country, member newspapers around the country. Right now, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. And of course, it's another Friday. And on behalf of Karen Carter Richards, the chair of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and all of our 230 African-American owned newspapers and other media companies, we really thank you for continuing Let It Be Known. And we have a great guest this morning, and we're looking forward to our program.
Absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, also in the news this morning, vaccine advisors to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration voted unanimously Thursday to recommend emergency use authorization of a booster dose of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. The FDA's Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee agreed use of a booster dose would be safe and effective in some people 6 months out from their primary series. Moderna had asked for the authorization for a half dose of its vaccine to be used as a booster for all for certain people. I'm sorry. And they say that half dose. I've seen comments, Dr. Chavis, from Dr. Cameron Webb and Dr. Ebony Hilton and others who say this half dose is extremely effective. And all 19 members of the committee supported authorizing this small dose, the half the size of the 100 microgram milligram dose used in the primary series of the 2-dose vaccine. At least 6 months after the second dose, you should get this booster shot. And right now, it's only for certain groups, people ages 65 and older, people ages 18 to 64 who are at high risk of severe COVID-19, and people ages 18 to 64 whose exposure to the coronavirus in their settings or jobs put them at risk for COVID-19 complications or severe illnesses. The vaccines committee will meet today again, and today they're going to discuss a booster for Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So, Dr. Chavez, we are seeing some progress in the fight against the coronavirus.
Making a lot of progress, and we salute all of those physicians, all those scholars in the medical field who work on with the FDA as well as with the CDC and all the research facilities. I think that we should pay more attention to the science and to the scientists, and particularly African Americans and other communities of color. There's still a disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our communities. And that's because there's still too much hesitation. Some people are still refusing to wear masks. Some people are still not washing their hands or social distancing. And this causes a big problem for Black people, particularly for young people as well as old people. It's intergenerational. So this is good news this morning from the FDA.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chavez, finally, as a lifelong student of history, Congressman James Clyburn said he believes that the past is prologue, and he tends to rely on history to help inform his decisions in public life. In his exclusive monthly column for the National Newspaper Publishers Association at blackpressusa.com, the congressman writes that he often paraphrased George Santayana, who is credited with having said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." With some history lessons in mind, the congressman says he's been sounding the alarm as Congress works to put together the Build Back Better Act, a comprehensive bill to invest in American families. Together with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, this legislation would be a significant step towards fulfilling the campaign promises that President Joe Biden and Democrats ran on during the last election cycle. Promises that, if kept, will turn the tide on some of the growing inequities in this country, according to the congressman. You can read the entire column at www.blackpressusa.com. And again, you can read it in many of our member papers around the country. So the congressman, again, does not disappoint in his monthly columns with the Black Press.
Absolutely. And we agree with Congressman Jim Clyburn. We should learn from history, not repeat history. And, if you have to, particularly now, as you know, Stacey, there's a debate about whether or not to teach Black history, whether or not to teach about slavery, whether or not to teach about the transatlantic slave trade, whether or not to tell young people, not just Black young people, but all young people, the truth about history. So Clyburn is right. And we have to fight. We have to fight to make sure that we don't let anybody suppress our vote. But we also have to fight to make sure that nobody suppresses or tampers with our history.
Absolutely. I want to say good morning, a special good morning to Cheryl Smith out in Texas, the Texas Metro News publisher there, iMessenger Media. It's always great to see Cheryl in the morning. We got to get Cheryl back on the program, Dr. Chavez. She's always
Cheryl is also the Region 4 president of the NAACP, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, all the great states in the Southwest. Cheryl is our regional president.
Yeah, absolutely. So good morning to Cheryl Smith. And I want to say good morning to our special guest this morning. Dr. Stephanie Myers is the chair of the Black Women for Positive Change, a national policy-focused network of predominantly African-American women and quote-unquote good brothers. So let's welcome Dr. Myers. Good morning.
Good morning, Stacey. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Dr. Chavez.
Dr. Myers, thank you. You know, I work with you very closely, and a salute to you and all of the sisters who continue to not only improve the quality of life of our communities, but we really appreciate your leadership, and always so good to see you.
Thank you.
Dr. Myers, I'm going to start very generically because I mentioned that term, and I also noted on your website, it has in quotations, good brothers. Tell us about a little bit about the good brothers before we get into Black Women for Positive Change and what it's really about.
Well, our organization, when we started off as a group of women from around the country. And then we realized that we cannot support and build our community unless we do it in partnership with our men. And Dick Gregory had a favorite saying where he would call men good brothers. So we kind of adopted Dick Gregory's slogan, and we are so proud and so thrilled to work with a whole network of Black men around the country. And I must say that we are a multicultural group now also. So we have Black men. We also have men who are not Black who participate with us. Dr. Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, where they had the terrible shooting 3 years ago, is one of our good brothers. And Dr. Ben Chavis, we honor him as a part of our network. So we really think it's important to have the input and involvement. My husband's the original good brother, and we feel that it's critical that we work together if we're going to solve these huge problems facing America.
Yeah, and you just answered my follow-up question as you were speaking. Why is that so important to have others, non-African Americans, involved? But you're absolutely right. It has to be a collaborative thing, and it's great to see that happen. Let's talk about Black women. You know, so much, and this is historically, and it's certainly today, Black women face so much. It's so many different ways you can go at this, but where do you start when you're talking about this, the load that Black women have been forced to shoulder their entire lives?
Well, it's just like Dr. Chavis was referring to the past as prologue, and you and Stacy were talking about this whole issue. Black women have suffered from the very moment we arrived here in this nation, and the suffering has gone from being enslaved to being sexually abused, raped, violence, watching our men be killed at the hands of law enforcement and in the streets. So Black women have had to be strong, and we have certainly had to reach out for our faith and make that the centerpiece of our lives and our families. But we still have to work together, and Black women, we are trying to look forward and trying to understand what do our young people need so that they can move into their potential, because we have terrific, smart young people. Most of you on this call know that a 3 or 4 year old these days can work a cell phone. And we have got a genius population among us. So as Black women, it's our responsibility to help that intergenerational power be transferred and the brilliance of our men to be transferred to our children. So that's part of our challenge as Black women to move forward toward the future.
Yeah, and I know part of the objective, a big part of the objective, is to change the culture of violence in America. How do we do that?
Well, that is so critical because America was born into violence. The enslavement process was the very foundation of this country. The fact of the genocide against Native Americans, part of the foundation of America. And the white Europeans who don't really realize that white people, when they brought them here as indentured servants and were slaves for 7 years, they were made the wardens and the slave catchers, and they were made to be violent against us, the Black people. So there's been transfer of violence in this nation, and that is the culture. You see it on television, you see it in the movies, we hear it in the music. That is our culture. So we've got to go back to the beginning, and we have to change the culture. And if the schools and the politicians aren't willing to let us teach this culture in the schools, then we have to teach it in the churches. We have to teach it in the streets. The Black press has to teach it. I'm so thrilled this morning to be talking to an audience of Black press, because you are critical in what we have done from the very beginning during the Civil War days up now. The Black press has been the voice of truth. So we have to come together and change the dialogue.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis, I'll throw it to you.
Well, Dr. Myers is not only accurate, but one of the reasons why we have a up and coming genius generation of young thinkers, young doers, young innovators is because of sisters like Dr. Myers. She's a sister leader. And we have good brothers, but one of the reasons why we have good brothers, we have good sisters. And so good brothers, good sisters working together. But I think she's really hit on something that sometimes a lot of our organizations miss. If you want to change people's behavior, you have to change the culture. What we think about, what's the nature of our faith, what do we really believe in, and how do we come together? Very early on, as she mentioned, that not only violence was used, but violence was used not to intimidate us, to put us in fear. Violence was also used to make us have disunity among us rather than unity among us. And so I'm so pleased that this group organization of Black women, many of them I know personally and admire for their leadership, helps to make a difference. We have to pay attention to our spirituality. We have to pay attention to our sociology. We have to pay attention to our art, our culture, our poetry, the things that make us think. And a lot of times the violence that happens internecine inside the Black community is driven from external forces. You just talked about earlier about the mass incarceration and all the things that are done to people who are incarcerated. It causes a recidivism. It causes a culture of self-destruction rather than a culture of uplift. And that's why movements and moments for change are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that we're trying to manifest this is through a month of nonviolence. For the last 10 years, we have pulled together our national network to create a violence prevention series of activities around the country. Our month this year began in October 1st. Will go until the end of the month, October 31st. And Dr. Chavis, you just mentioned music and poetry and culture. At the end of the month, our young people are going to have a concert where they're going to express through music and poetry nonviolence themes about getting along, working together. That's and so great. We're having this series of workshops through the month where we're addressing everything from young Black men in sports as alternatives to violence to domestic violence. We're even going to have a hearing, and Dr. Chavis and the Black press would be terrific if on October 23rd, you wish to come and testify about violence and what needs to be done. We're having a citizens hearing to ask people who are family members or victims of violence to talk about what happened to them and we're calling it From Pain to Power, because we have witnessed in America Black people losing their family members and then converting it into power. Attorney Benjamin Crump has been an incredible leader in this area, Reverend Sharpton, and we have family members who have lost their loved ones and are now community leaders. So we're going to be highlighting them as well. So we can't count on the government to do everything. We have to do it. Our churches have to do it. If the schools and the school boards won't let us do it, then we have to go to our weekend schools and our organizations and our children's groups. Then we have to do it ourselves.
Wow. And you're also, Dr. Mize, I don't want to leave out the fact that you're an accomplished author. Tell us about your work as an author.
Well, I love history, much like Congressman Clyburn made in his column in the Black press. History is prologue. And so I try to focus on those stories of history that haven't made it into the mainstream. So one of my recent books is about the Queen of England, Queen Charlotte, who was Queen of England for 57 years. And this is a woman with mixed race heritage. Now, we know in America, if you had one drop of Black blood, you could be enslaved. So she had more than one drop of Black blood. She was an heiress of the Moors of Portugal. So I wrote a book called The Invisible Queen. Your audience can get copies at myerspublishing.com, which is our minority-owned business that my husband and I own. And we wanted to tell the story about this woman who was very well known to have Black heritage, and she was a tremendous abolitionist. And the work that she did, she helped get thousands of people up to Nova Scotia, Canada. And she was just very dedicated. And people don't realize that a woman with Black heritage discovered Mozart. So we are trying to bring stories to the mainstream that people don't know about so that we can have our full story of history, not just the part that's been revised and changed and put out.
Yeah, and one of the things you talk about too, there is the real history, right? We know that there was this award-winning report a couple of years ago, the 1619 report in the New York Times. But as Dr. Chavis has often pointed out, we hear people talk about 400 years, but we've traced that it's 500 years. The United Nations recognizes 500 years of the transatlantic slave trade. So it is important, Dr. Myers, as you said, we are well aware of that. Tell us a little bit more about this concert and event that's coming up. Where can people see this at? Is there tickets involved? How can they attend?
Okay, you can go to monthofnonviolence.org, www.monthofnonviolence.org, and all of the events are posted up. Saturday night, the 16th, tomorrow, we have an event called the Elizabeth Keckley Awards, where we're going to be honoring outstanding leaders. We're going to honor Attorney Benjamin Crump for the work that he has done. He just brought about that incredible victory for the family of George Floyd, that horrible tragedy in Minneapolis of George Floyd. We're going to be honoring the National Black Nurses. Just consider that our nurses go to work every day during a pandemic. So we're going to honor the National Black Nurses Association. Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds, a very close friend of Dr. Chavis's and a member of the Black Press, will be honored, and others will be honored as well. One person I can't leave out is an unknown hero named Nikki Stevenson, who was the power behind Motown. And we don't even know his name, but he's the one in the studio discovering Stevie Wonder, producing Marvin Gaye. It's a free concert. It's a concert plus an awards event. It's free. You can go on www.monthofnonviolence.org and sign up through Eventbrite. We're asking people to make donations because nothing is free, but we're making it available during this pandemic at no cost. I mentioned the youth concert and the youth summit. That's October 29th and October 30th. We want our young people to know that they have opportunities, and we have to make those opportunities for them. So please have your young people sign up. We need your help, because right now, our Generation Zs, who are age 14 to 24, our millennials, they're depressed. They're upset. They're feeling very cut off from their families and from society. I had a young man tell me the reason he was in a gang and the reason he was violent was because all the adults in his life were too busy for him. His mother was a single mom, and she didn't have time. In the morning when he got up, he and his siblings were fighting. On the bus, they were fighting. In the streets, the people were making fun of him. And when he got to school, if anybody messed with him, he fired on them. Then he would go get suspended and be on the pathway to jail. We have to break that cycle. We have to change the culture. Our young people are caught in a trap, and pandemic has made it so much worse. So we have to intervene with opportunities. The Black Press, please teach our young people how to write columns. Create some columns for the Gen Zs to speak out. They're dying to be heard. I would love to see a column where Gen Zs can talk about all the issues they care about. This is the way that we can show them they can be like Dr. Chavis and be a hero in the Black Press for many, many years and be a giant of the Black Press. So these are the ways that we want to build pathways to success and opportunities, because opportunities are alternatives to violence.
Absolutely. And listen, and we're going to take you up on that. I think it's a great suggestion. And I know our publishers who are listening, everybody's nodding their heads in the affirmative.
Okay,
we're going to have that youth column.
That would be fantastic. Well, we have some brilliant young people who are ready to write and are ready to do it. And that would be just absolutely outstanding. And our young people, they have some strong attitudes. We really have to talk with them, and we have to find industries. I worked in the commercial space transportation industry. In fact, I was the first person to authorize a commercial launch when I was at the Department of Transportation. We have to get our kids into low Earth orbit and into space. We're seeing all these launches now going to space. Well, we have to demand that our kids get a chance to be one of those complimentary flights that they're giving, because I know that our young people are going to go to space and create music and experiences that no one's even thought of. because they're creative. And we don't know what the sound is going to be like until our kids get up there and find ways to create new beginnings and new futures.
Well, Dr. Myers, you've been very prophetic. Next week, I'm doing an op-ed entitled "From Civil Rights to Space Rights."
All right.
We got to make sure that diversity, equity, inclusion is not only on Earth, but also in the heavens.
Absolutely, because these people are going to space because, unfortunately, the planet Earth is in trouble. Not only do we have more than 21,000 murders in America, this last year, we have climate change. We have the glaciers melting. I mean, we don't know how long America and the rest of the world is going to be inhabitable. Several hundred years from now, we don't know. And I want my great, 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 great grandchildren to have a refuge to go to. And we don't know what that's going to look like. So we can't shut down our minds and say, well, if the earth floods, then that's Noah's flood, the ark is flooding and it's all over. No. We want to succeed and we want to live into whatever future there is. And space looks like it's going to be part of it.
I know since Stacey Brown is smiling because I've been chatting him and Norman Rich about getting those spacesuits ready.
Well, we need to do it. And I'd love to see Africa develop a capacity to get to Earth because we believe we know we're the original people. And we don't know where the original people actually came from. So we can't close off any options. But all of these are the issues of opportunity that we want to talk about during the month of nonviolence. And that's why it's important for us to dialogue. We really want to invite everyone. Go to www.monthofthnonviolence.org. I just saw Denise Rolark Barnes in the chat room. She's a colleague of ours and has worked with us for years. And the Black press is critical. And we love you. We know you. We know that you always make sure we get the truth. And that's why George Floyd's family was able to get the reward that they got. And that's why we know about these horrible, horrible crimes of violence. If we didn't have you, we wouldn't know the truth. It would be covered up. So we thank you so much for that.
And that's why we know about the hidden figures, because the New Journal and Guide in Virginia was the first one years and years ago to boost up these women who was behind the first space flight from the United States. Also, Denise, she's one of the publishers in the Black press who do subscribe to that, giving young people an opportunity to express themselves, as she writes in. If you go to wibridgedc.com, that's one of her publications, you will see some great journalism by some young individuals, young Black individuals, men and women at the Bridge, wibridgedc.com. I think there's a movement, there's been this movement to make sure that our younger ones are involved in the Black press. And Dr. Myers, we are running out of time, but again, the circle of violence, just a last word on that. How do we get a handle on this violence, keep our kids away? Doesn't it start there at that level with the kids?
It starts at the kitchen table. Violence starts at the kitchen table because that's where a lot of people learn it. And it goes from the table into the streets, into the neighborhood, into the schools and the workplaces. Unfortunately, people, we have to face it. Many of us know people of victims. Some of us are aware of domestic violence that has gone on in our neighborhoods and even in our families. So we can't ignore it anymore. 1 out of 5 women is a victim of domestic violence. We have to address this straight up in the family, in the church, and in the community. And that's why we ask everyone, please join us in this effort. There will be an 11th month of nonviolence next year. Sign up, get involved, and change your community.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Dr. Myers. Don't forget to check out the NNPA and the Black Press of America on TikTok at NNPA Black Press. Another young, talented person operates the Black Press's TikTok from Howard University. You got to check it out. TikTok is NNPA Black Press. And this is the weekend. So, of course, every Sunday and throughout the week, actually, check your local listings for the Chavis Chronicles on PBS TV and PBS World. Man, they are doing such a great job over there, reaching over 91 million households. Let it be known, in the words of Angela Davis, when Black women win victories, It is a boost for virtually every segment of society. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, wear a mask, get vaccinated, y'all. It's a serious thing. We'll see you next week.